Tonight we're in Salford in Greater Manchester for a special programme focusing on the impact of Monday's shocking events at Manchester Arena. Welcome to Question Time. And here with us tonight, the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, the Mayor of Greater Manchester and former Cabinet Minister, Andy Burnham, Colin Parry, who, after his son died in the Warrington bombing, set up a foundation for peace, which, among other things, works against radicalisation, the counter-extremism campaigner and former advisor to the Home Office, Sarah Khan, and the head of the Police and Crime Commissioners Association and former Chief Prosecutor for North West England, Nazir Afzal. Thank you very much. And I should just say before we start that election campaigning, of course, remains suspended until tomorrow. So we don't have our usual multi-party panel for tonight's Question Time. We will resume with the normal party political Question Time next Thursday. But we take our first question tonight from Darren Halkett, please.
Yeah. As a father of 3 young girls living here in Manchester, I found it hard to come to terms with Monday night's atrocities. What decisive actions should government take to protect its citizens?
What decisive actions should government take? Amber Rudd.
I find it hard to come to terms with it as well, as a mother of 2 young children. And I think the important thing for us to do now is to concentrate on allowing the police and the intelligence services to sort out the operation. There may be lessons to learn afterwards. We have some very strong counter-terrorism programmes in place, which we may discuss later today. But I think the important thing now is to allow the operation to complete. It is an ongoing investigation. And what we saw on Monday night was devastating, barbaric. What we also saw was some extraordinary compassion and strength in the city of Manchester. It's something that the emergency services, the NHS, had rehearsed for. We hoped it wouldn't happen. But when it did happen, the operation worked incredibly smoothly. And I'd like to take the opportunity, if I may, to thank the emergency services and the NHS staff in the city.
And what was the point of bringing the army out onto the streets? What was that designed to do?
Well, we've been at the threat level of severe since 2013. We've moved to critical because it's an ongoing operation. The fact is that when it's at that stage, we have the option to call in Operation Tempora, which allows army military support to be drawn in to support the police. It will allow, I hope, sir, for you and your family to feel more secure when you go around your everyday life, because that's what we want people to do. But during this period of critical, which we hope will only last for a few days, it could be longer, it will depend on the operation, we've pulled down additional support from the army so that we can go about our normal life. Events in Manchester and further afield can take place with extra armed police supporting them.
Nazir Afzal, do you agree with that as the proper action to take?
It's necessary at the moment because it's an ongoing investigation, and we've had this before. The second time, I think, or third time in 10 years, where we've had to go to what involves the armed forces behind the wire to enable police officers to go out on the streets. And I think it's a necessary thing, but it's, previous examples tell us it only lasts 5 or 7 days. So once we've got this inquiry to a point where we're safe, then the army can go back to doing what they do. To answer the gentleman's question, I love Manchester. I've lived here 6 years. I'm amazed at your resilience, your tolerance. I was at the vigil on Tuesday night with colleagues here, some of them, and I was touched by it all, and I cried. And I cried when people started chanting Manchester, Manchester, Manchester. I cried today when people were having 1-minute silence and people started singing Don't Look Back in Anger. Immediately afterwards. That is what Manchester is special for. And in terms of what you do now, you do what I've done, which is have a conversation with your children, because they are probably keeping things to themselves, and it's about getting them the ability, or giving them the ability to talk about what they feel. They're doing it in their schools, but we can do it in our homes.
But Darren's question was, what decisive actions should government take?
Absolutely. What government has to do, as the Home Secretary said, allow the police to carry out their investigation. I know Greater Manchester Police well, being the Chief Prosecutor up here for 6 years. They're extremely effective when it comes to serious and organised crime, and I know how effective they are in this particular operation. At the same time, there is a conversation we will have, I'm sure, during the course of this evening, around what needs to happen around de-radicalisation, what more we can do around controlling the threat that we're facing, how we can ensure that we get more information from the communities. People know now that much of what we know about the particular suspect, the particular bomber, let's put it bluntly, came from the communities themselves. And so how do we engage, how do we ensure that people are able to provide information so the security services and the police can do their jobs?
But you're involved in, as you say, closely involved with the police. When the Chief Constable of Manchester said, I think it's clear that this is a network that we're investigating, were you surprised at that, given that the job of the police is to spot these networks before they emerge?
I'm not going to speak for policing tonight. I don't speak for the commissioners, but what I can tell you, based on what I know already, is that we've had, sadly, a number of incidents across Europe which have been low level in terms of sophistication. A man with a knife, a truck. They've caused enormous damage and enormous misery. What we've had here, as we all know, is somebody with a little bit more sophistication. And evidently, the evidence is suggesting a wider network involved. And I know for a fact the Greater Manchester Police are tackling that network. That's part of the reason why we've gone to getting the armed forces to support, certainly allow police officers to be out doing this kind of work. So I'm satisfied that the police are doing a phenomenal job this time around, but they're doing it with the assistance of the communities.
All right. Darren, let me just come back to you before we go around the rest of the panel. What do you make of what you've heard so far from...
I mean, what the police and the security services do is obviously commendable, but I think my issue is that everything you've just described there is reactionary. So I'm equally as interested to know what we're doing to prevent things like this happening in the first place.
Andy Burnham.
Well, like you, I found it very hard to come to terms with what has happened. I've got young girls like you. I've been coming out of that arena at that time of night. I can picture that scene. We all could. It could have been any of us. I think we all feel that, and our hearts go out to those families. To target children, young people, families in that way is unthinkably evil in my view. I support what the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary have done this week. They have taken decisive action, and we should give them credit for that. Going forward, I think we do need a conversation about police resources. With the terror threat high, with hate crime up, with violent crime up, you can't keep the police funding line going down and down. We have to have a conversation about that. And on your point, I think we need to do better at identifying people in our communities at risk of radicalisation. Work with the Muslim communities to put more onus on them to help us identify those people. But just to say one point, this has been our darkest hour. But I would also say we've seen the best of Greater Manchester as well this week. I couldn't be more proud of what I've seen. I'm proud of the public servants who dropped everything and came into work on Monday night. I'm proud of the people who opened their doors to strangers and drove them around the city. I'm proud of the 2 homeless people who came and helped children and older people who needed that help. But most of all, I am proud of the people of Greater Manchester. They have said to the terrorists, we refuse to follow your trap and start dividing and blaming each other. We're not going to be beaten by this. We will stand together and tell you tonight, this is the greatest city in the world, and I couldn't be more proud of it.
If the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester had had more police at his disposal, you mentioned the numbers have fallen and this needs looking at, do you think it would have been possible that this network would have been discovered before it was possible to let this bomb off in the city?
I think it's hard to give a completely definitive answer to that question, David. What I would say is, in my view, neighbourhood policing is the first building block of an effective intelligence system. The eyes and the ears on the ground in those communities, feeding information back. And if you allow neighbourhood policing to become too eroded, and if there aren't enough police on our streets, then I think it does become a problem. Now, I'm not saying that did in any way contribute. It's too early to say that. And I'm certainly not saying that there was a problem with the number of people who responded, because the response, in my view, was excellent. But I think we do have to have a debate now about whether or not the frontline police force can be cut. I don't believe it can, and I would say this now needs to become an issue in the election campaign once we've dealt with the immediate events of this week.
Let's hear from you, sir, in the pink shirt there. I'll come to you in a moment. Yes.
The resources were already there. In 2015, Theresa May, who was then Home Secretary, was addressed the Police Federation and told them that they were scaremongering because she was reducing the police numbers and community policing. And the Police Federation said at the time that low-level intelligence is what gives them the information and is able to feed those onto the intelligence services about terrorist activity. And we're now 20,000 police officers down, and we get atrocities like this. Does the government not expect this?
No, I have to say I don't accept that. I have asked the head of counter-terrorism whether it is about resources. It is not. There may be a conversation to have about policing. We may have that at some stage, but now is not that conversation. We must not imply that this terrorist activity wouldn't have taken place if there had been more policing. Good counter-terrorism activity is because you have a close relationship between the policing and the intelligence services. That's what we have. That's why the UK has a strong counter-terrorist network. It's also about making sure that we get in early on radicalisation, but it's not about those pure numbers on the streets, as you've implied, sir.
You want to come back on that?
Well, I think it is about police numbers because it's low-level intelligence which gives you the information. That, you know, we're asking the intelligence services are telling us that, you know, they're tracking telephone calls, they're looking at emails, stuff like this. And again, the Chief Constable said that this is a network of people. This wasn't a lone wolf attack.
No.
This was a well-organised network. So where were the intelligence services?
Not,
where were they getting that information from?
It's not where we get the intelligence from. Where we get the intelligence from is much more from the PREVENT strategy, which is community-led within the communities, which engages with local activities, local groups, not through the police largely. It's about having a strategy to engage in the community, which is community-led.
Well, you're disagreeing with my argument.
No,
We've lost all the community officers.
No, it's not about policing so much as engaging with community leaders in the area.
Colin Parry.
I think one of the great characteristics of the British people is we're realists and not necessarily idealists. And the reality is that with 3 times the police force strength in the UK, we can't possibly stop every single attack, and there will be attacks that get through. That's the awful truth. And I think what the government does is perhaps in need of extra effort. Maybe that's really not a matter for me to say how many police officers we have, and putting the armed forces on the streets I think is a show of strength. I don't know whether it actually makes a lot of difference. I think the problem is that the people who do this do it to divide the country. They want to set Muslims against, if you like, the indigenous British people, and they want to cause discord and discontent and get the two groups to never talk. And I think what we have to do as a nation is accept that we cannot live in silos. We have to integrate. We have to accept each other. This is now a multicultural, multinational, multi-ethnic country. The sooner we recognise it's never going to go back to how it was in 1930. This is the year 2017. We've got to integrate. We've got to become friendlier. We've got to talk to each other more. We've got to do things together. And I think civil society has to play its part.
Okay. You say
I just wanted to ask especially Amber Rudd, how well thought through has been the decision to deploy troops? Obviously, the period of the deployment is overlapping the beginning of the campaign season. Now, as people begin to engage in protests and demonstrations, what are the risks that in the event that these protests become violent, caused by agents provocateurs, that the armed forces could use live ammunition against protesters? So what are the rules of engagement governing the relationship between the police, the armed forces, and potential encounters with people engaging in normal political protest activity that may potentially become violent?
Okay, I mean, the movement of the threat level from severe to critical, which is part of this process, is done by an independent body. So I just need everyone to appreciate that. That's not a government proposal. It's done by an independent body, the Joint Terrorist Analysis Centre. And in terms of the troops that come from the military, they are under the authority of the police as they operate. And it is the police who request them. They go to the areas that are requested by the police, and they will make sure that they are operating as they should be. And I think you should take some comfort from the fact that our military do support the police in this way. There are other incidents where they've worked together closely, and I would also say that we only expect it to be temporary. So I would hope, as was said before, that this should only be for a few days. We're sensitive to the fact that it's during an election period, but it's got nothing to do with the fact that we have this operation, we have to keep people safe, and these procedures have to be put in place.
I think it's important for me to back what we've just heard up, because I can say as well, this has not been a political decision. The effect of it has been to allow more police officers, specially trained police officers, to be deployed on the streets of Greater Manchester, and you may have seen some of them around this week. So it has been an exceptionally difficult week. Of course, at the beginning of the week, there wasn't clarity about how far the network spread and what the scale of the issue we were facing was. Action had to be taken. In my view, the government took the right action. I think it's important for me to say that.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean...
Hold on, Sarah Khan.
The events on Monday evening were truly distressing. I'm a mother of 2 young daughters. I've lived and studied in this great city for 4 years, and an attack on the people of Manchester is indeed an attack on us all. I want to answer both of your questions, Dan, because I think both questions are really, really important. The government absolutely have a role to play in protecting our lives as citizens. That's probably one of their most important and primary responsibilities. And my view very much is that in order to counter terrorism, to counter radicalisation, it needs to be a holistic, multi-pronged strategy. You need to have a bottom-up approach where civil society groups, anti-racism organisations, families, communities, faith institutions and mosques, for example, they all have a role, and we'll probably talk about this later on as we talk about radicalisation, how to prevent radicalisation. But there's an important role that can be played from a bottom-up approach. Government has a top-down responsibility, and that includes also taking down pieces of illegal material off the internet, engaging with social media sites, for example, and making sure that they fulfil their responsibilities. So I think it has to be very much a multi-pronged approach. But I also, your second question to me really, I think, is very pertinent, because I think what we have to recognise right now is that this attack that happened on Monday follows in the long line of a number of attacks that have hit this country, particularly in the last 20 years. In 2000, MI5 discovered Britain's first Islamist bomb-making factory. We've had 7/7. In 2007, Glasgow Airport got attacked. We've had, since that time, hundreds of people who've been convicted for Islamist-related offences. We've had hundreds of people leave our country to join ISIS, to live in their territory and support jihadist organisations. In my view, the struggle, and it is a struggle now against Islamist extremism, has increased in potency. It's not decreased. And we have to ask ourselves, are we doing enough? Are we upscaling our work to recognise the current threat? And the current threat is coming from there. And just really, really very quickly, as a country, we have stood up against fascism, racism and terrorism. During the Second World War, we stood up to fascism. We challenged the National Front in the 1970s. We combated IRA terrorism. But the fact of the matter is, right now, the biggest threat that we are facing comes from Islamist-inspired terrorism, who, as Colin said, rightly wants to divide us, but also kill us, all of us. And the fact of the matter is that if we want to defeat this threat, we all have to together make a difference and play our part.
All right, Sarah, thank you. We've got so many questions. I'd like to go on to what Sarah was talking about. Just before I do, remember, if you're watching this at home, you can join in on Twitter and on Facebook. The hashtag is BBCQT. You can also text us, 83981 is the number. You push the red button to see what others are saying. And while I'm on about it, just a reminder, Question Time will be in Barnet next week, and the details are on the screen. Will be in a moment, and I'll give them at the end. Let's have a question from Lloyd Cawthorne, please, then.
How can we prevent Brits from being radicalised?
How can we prevent Brits from being radicalised? Nazir Afzal.
Well, we have a strategy that perhaps is not as well understood as it could be. My conversations with the Home Secretary's colleagues in the Home Office around the prevent strategy which I know some people booed earlier on, it was mentioned. Prevent is actually just safeguarding. I dealt with, as you know, the Rochdale case. That was safeguarding children from sexual abuse. I've dealt with cases involving safeguarding people from going into criminality of other types. This is preventing people or safeguarding people from going down the route of extremism and radicalisation.
And in a nutshell, just explain what it is that it does.
Identifying the signs, people will identify the signs of somebody somewhere that might be at risk of either being a victim or, more likely, somebody that's so vulnerable that they're going to be groomed in some way to become a radical. And identifying the signs and then referring that individual to an authority who provide them with mentors and support. It could be mental health support, it could be educational support, it could be all manner of things. The concerns I've had around the Prevent strategy, which are historical, they're not my view right now because I've met with current colleagues. Historically, there's been poor communication around it, there's been poor community engagement about it, there's been a poor narrative around this, and people really haven't understood that what it's all about is keeping our children safe and ensuring that our children don't get radicalised and don't get extracted by those people who are desperate to cultivate them, as this individual may well have been done.
But Colin Parry, perhaps you come on this. I mean, there have been a lot of criticism of Prevent because it means people telling on people in school, telling on their families and the rest of it. Do you have doubts about it? Do you think it's been effective? Your foundation deals with it.
Yes. My foundation largely works on the principle of early intervention, and the early intervention happens when local authorities, police and crime commissioners, local schools, identify warning signs, identify behaviours which are causing concern, and then ask organisations such as mine to apply the kind of programmes we've built up down the years to bring those young people to the Peace Centre in Warrington. And then we work with them very closely and we try to strip back where their views are coming from, what they're based on, where have they been fed this often perverse and twisted ideology, and get them to mix with people who they might otherwise not meet. And believe it or not, and I can prove this to be absolutely the case, going back to the days of the IRA, you can, if you cultivate the right atmosphere in a safe environment, you can get people who would otherwise never meet, who've got no regard for each other, to eventually start to talk to each other. I ended up with a very warm relationship with somebody that most people in this country would have never imagined I would have had a warm relationship with, Martha McGuinness. Now, you might say, why the hell would Colin Parry speak to Martha McGuinness? The very fact is that Martha McGuinness, in the end, became a person who wanted to talk to me. Now, if conversation can be encouraged, if meetings can be encouraged, you do reduce gaps. It's as simple as that. You reduce misunderstandings. Okay. I don't say you can cure everything, but I tell you what, it makes one hell of a difference.
All right. Andy Burnham, you said back in June last year, I do feel that the brand that is Prevent is so toxic now that I think it's got to go. Can you explain why you feel it's not the right approach, or unless you've changed your view on it?
No. I'm not saying that we don't need a programme that works in communities to identify people at risk of radicalisation. We most certainly do need a programme to do that. The debate is about how do we do that. And the problem is, as you said before, Prevent works on the principle that the community, the Muslim community in particular, is under suspicion, under surveillance. And this, I think, was felt by the Catholic community in Northern Ireland. There were policies aimed at them, but not at everybody else. And that then becomes a problem. It can actually become counterproductive. It can actually radicalise if people feel they are being picked upon. So I think there is the need for a fundamental review of Prevent, probably to be renamed, I would say. It should be cross-party, this review. And I think it needs to start again working on a basis of trust with community organisations, particularly in the Muslim community. And let's say, be fair, we expect them to do more to help us, to provide information, to be able to take action.
Where has it gone wrong for people who don't know the policy?
It's become quite a state approach. There's a statutory duty now on public bodies to report. And there was a young man on the radio this morning saying the quality of Prevent officers varies greatly, and some confuse what is just normal religious activity for extremism. So you can imagine how, if someone is reported to the police for carrying out their faith, for worshipping, and all of a sudden they're under suspicion, you can imagine how that creates a backlash in some communities. So I think we have to get this right. We need a programme. We need to get in early and identify those at risk of radicalisation. But we have to acknowledge that the current programme isn't working. And it's true, that name Prevent is toxic in parts of the Muslim community.
And is it, just for you, is it only the Muslim community that Prevent looks at? Or is it...
The point, I think, is it's
Yes.
felt by the Muslim community that the resources are predominantly targeted at them. And I think that's the feeling. You know, we have radicalisation on the right of politics. We've seen somebody kill my friend Joe Cox in the last year, and we need to have a debate about radicalisation in that way too. And I think this is the problem, that it's seen as though it's all about the Muslim community, and that creates the backlash.
you say up there, yes, in blue. Yes.
I agree with Andy. I think that what's happening is we need to look at the Prevent strategy. Clearly, it is toxic in some areas, but we can always review a strategy, and we can look. And ongoing from the terrible events that happened earlier this week in Manchester, we owe it to the people to look for a strategy, and I'm delighted that we're having some cross-party agreement, because that's what we as a country need to move forward. And let's not, but when we start the manifesto season again for the next couple of weeks, please let's remember that by cooperating we'll get further quicker, and I definitely think that that's what I'd like to see moving forward.
OK, and you, sir, over there, and then I come to you.
I'd be really concerned about what Andy was saying there. I think anybody who's prepared to do the sort of things that we've seen recently in terms of radical Islamic terrorism, anybody who does that on the basis that we've got a Prevent strategy, which is trying to help people actually, there is something wrong with the basic ideology. I think the problem comes from the mosques. And I've got something that I wanted to read you, which actually came from Didsbury Mosque, because I spent my time actually doing some research. And this is direct from Didsbury Mosque. This is a leaflet that I was given on an open day. And this says, living in a society in which people have accepted Western lifestyle as their way of life brings immorality at every step. Modesty, shame and honour have no place in Western civilization. That is direct from Didsbury Mosque.
All right.
And that was given in a very expensive package with DVDs, and this is from a charity. And that is what Muslims are listening to.
All right.
And there are a lot of good Muslims,
All right,
but they are not being helped by this.
All right, let me... from the woman there in blue, yes, you, in the centre, yeah. Do you want to answer that? Yes.
Yes. The Muslim community has been accused by some politicians and media anchors of not doing enough and almost in denial or even complicit with the threat of extremism. Yet, the Manchester Muslim community, at risk to themselves, reported Salman Abidi for his militant views. Isn't this a catastrophic failure of Theresa May's security under her watch as Home Secretary?
Right. And just what do you make of what the man up there said about the pamphlet that he had from the mosque?
All I can say is I have been an attendee of Didsbury Mosque for 30 years or so. And Didsbury Mosque is a mosque that opens its doors to non-Muslims every week on a Sunday. It's a very multicultural community. It's a mosque that invites women in, men in, people of all faiths and all nationalities. And where that's come from, I don't know.
That's absolutely correct, and that was given to me on a Sunday, on an open day. You get tea and biscuits, very, very nice.
Yeah.
All right.
Very, very nice people.
It's not an official...
I have also been in Didsbury
Yes, it's not
having
official
debates,
from Didsbury Mosque.
having debates with young women.
I think two lines taken out of context about Didsbury Mosque is unfair.
All right.
Sorry, how is that out of context?
Hold on.
How is talking about British civilisation, Western civilisation?
Yes, you
out
may
of context.
well, we don't know who handed it to you or who wrote it. That's the point.
Well, I've got it here.
All right, I know you've got it there. I know, but
it's a charity leaflet that's given out officially from Didsbury Mosque.
All right, you've
with
made the
lots
point.
of other
Then.
leaflets.
Thank you. All right.
What more do you want?
What do you make of it, sir?
I want to get small plea tonight, David. I want people to listen to me very carefully. I am Manchester. I was born in Manchester. I was raised in Manchester. I'm a proud monk and a proud Muslim. And when Manchester hurt, I hurt. And I'm hurting after what happened on Monday. And what happened on Monday night was an evil act, an abhorrent act that should be condemned with the strongest condemnation. And to think that somebody can target small girls and anybody, but small girls in particular, to carry out evil should be said by everyone it's evil. But let me make a plea. I'm sitting next to a reverend here, a friend that I've known, and worked with in Manchester. And it seems that Muslims seem to be the target and collateral damage when these things happen. Islam is not the reason that people do bad things. People do bad things because they're evil and they're bad people. And I think that after these things happen, Islamophobia increases and attacks increase. Let us please not let people who hate and who want to divide us. Let's be united together. And Manchester will be united. And we should work together, stand shoulder to shoulder and say we will not accept hate. And we stand against Islamophobia and we condemn all sort of evil in all its forms.
Okay. Well, we've veered away from the original question Lloyd asked. Amber Rudd, perhaps you'd come back to it, which was how we prevent Brits from being radicalised. You heard what Andy Burnham said about the prevent strategy, sending out not necessarily the right signal to the Muslim community, and therefore people being hostile to that particular way of trying to prevent radicalisation. What's your answer?
I met a woman recently who came home and found that her 16-year-old son had just gone to Syria, and she hasn't been in touch with him, he hasn't been in touch with her, she probably won't see him again. And she called for help, and the Prevent coordinator sent someone to see her who was able to engage with her and her other children. And there were particularly 2 teenage girls who needed the support that was available through the Prevent strategy to make sure that they didn't become radicalised as she had as well, as her brother had. Last year, we stopped 150 people from going to Syria to fight, of which 50 were children. There's really strong evidence of Prevent initiatives helping families, saving children's lives and stopping de-radicalisation. I'd like everybody's help here, making sure that we speak up for the good work that is done by Prevent. The Foundation for Peace here is one of the largest providers in the area. Andy, I don't think you'd criticise the Foundation for Peace for the fantastic work that they do. We have 142 community-led organisations. This is not about police-led, they're about community-led organisations who do exactly as Zia said, try to safeguard young people. And let's remember...
When you said you stopped 150 people last year going to Syria, do you mean you wouldn't allow them to leave the country, or do you mean that you think you prevented them from taking the decision?
There is more evidence than just stopping them at the airport. But there's evidence that we've stopped 150 people, of which 50 are children. I can't be drawn any more detail on that, but it's been clearly documented that otherwise they would have gone. But I just do feel that we need to be stronger about the fact that Prevent is saving lives and is helping people. It is doing good work, and I'd like more support trying to make sure that we get that message out. The final point I was trying to get over is that it is community-led. It is not about getting policemen involved. It's about making sure that the local organisations, like the Foundation for Peace, are able to engage with young people on that level. It's not about the government being, as Sarah has said, bottom-up. It's about the government providing the support for the communities to work it out.
You say that.
To Amber Rudd, it's not about getting the police involved. Where's my security? Where are all these people's security coming from? We have PCSOs on the street that walk about with every other bit of kit I have seen, including handcuffs, that they do not have the power of arrest to evolve. Where's the security coming from? Where is MI5 in all this? We've no mention of this tonight. We have got £13.3 billion a year going out to foreign aid. No, hold on a second. That money that should be saved in this country and looking after ourselves. And I'm talking about everybody here. Doesn't matter what colour of creed we are, we look after ourselves first. Okay. Let's send it out there. Let's secure this country.
Well, I can say that we have given additional funding to the security services. They've got a 30% uplift because we're making sure that we do invest in the security services to keep people safe.
You're sending government aid to a country who has got a space programme and a nuclear warhead programme.
Yes, you said. Do you agree with him?
I have a slightly different point, but it comes back to the radicalisation point.
Go on then.
We've taken off the lid from... The perpetrator of this latest crime was a Libyan, so we removed Gaddafi. And we've had other perpetrators in the past coming from various Muslim countries, and we've removed Saddam Hussein. Why this government, either Labour or Conservative before them, has taken us into these places where we don't understand the cultures or the politics of the people, and why we've tried to be the policemen of the world, I fail to understand. Because if we take our resources...
away from these activities, we could have the resources that Colin Parry and Sarah Khan requires, because we could fund all the integration and the openness that we need. But instead, we're still in Afghanistan spending billions, and it's just crazy.
Sarah Khan.
I agree with Nazir when he says that there clearly appears to be a real misunderstanding about the aims and objectives of PREVENT. Let's be very clear about what space PREVENT operates in. You know, it's not desirable or possible for the state to start arresting people because they become radicalised. You know, you could become radicalised, but you've not committed a criminal offence. So what do you do with those individuals? That's the space PREVENT operates in. And unfortunately, you know, we hear things that, oh, PREVENT is about spying, PREVENT is it's about surveillance. None of those things are relevant to PREVENT at all. All of those are part of Pursue, which is part of Contest, which is another strand of the government's counter-terrorism strategy. People often conflate Pursue with PREVENT, and there's this basic misunderstanding. And I think what I'd like to see is perhaps the government doing more to educate people about what actually is PREVENT and what PREVENT isn't. And also, I think it's really important to recognise that it's not PREVENT that is toxic. It's the discourse around PREVENT that has become toxic. It's not the PREVENT strategy which is the problem. It's the politicisation around PREVENT which is increasingly becoming a problem. And let me explain what I mean around that. You know, I have seen politicians, for example, make unfounded claims about PREVENT, saying that, you know, if a Muslim child decides to no longer eat at McDonald's, that will lead to a PREVENT referral. Nonsense. I've heard so many of these false untruths about PREVENT. How is that going to encourage trust between Muslims who want to do this work and with the government? It doesn't. But also, and I have to really point this out, the fact of the matter is that in this country, we do have an Islamist-led organisations and a lobby who are actively seeking to make sure PREVENT fails, and that is no surprise to anybody. Since 2011, you know, back in 2011, organisations like Al-Muhajirun, which is now proscribed, which was run by the infamous Anjum Chowdhury, they were at the forefront of saying that we see in PREVENT a direct challenge to our attempting to radicalise young Muslims. And so they saw in PREVENT an ideological offensive. And what you're seeing now are Islamist groups who are operating in our country, taking up that baton and spreading lies around Muslim communities.
Can I just ask you to address the point that he made, that the work that PREVENT is doing is undermined by British foreign policy in Libya and the Middle East? Is that something that you come across in doing your work? That people say to you, well, what the British government is doing in our name is something we abhor?
There is no black and white answer to this issue of foreign policy, which we talk about all the time. Look, when we look at people like Mohammed Sadiq Khan, who was the ringleader of the 7/7 attacks, he made very clear that one of his prime motivations was our country's involvement in the Iraq War in 2003. But let me tell you about some of the people I work with. I come across 13-year-old girls who tell me that they want to go live in ISIS's caliphate because they think it's some sort of Islamic Disneyland. And these girls weren't even born before the Iraq War in 2003. Foreign policy has no relevance to those individuals. And also, has no because they have been online, they have been reading Islamist propaganda and ISIS propaganda, which we're not countering effectively enough. Well, this is why I'm saying to you that we have to have a multi-pronged approach where we, for example, my organisation has delivered theological counter-narratives to extremist ideology to Muslim parents to equip them to help build resilience in children. But I just want to make another point about the issue of foreign policy. Very quickly.
And I want to go to the woman here.
We also have to look at what ISIS themselves have said. Last year, I mean, they have an English online magazine called Dabiq. One of their editions last year, they made it very clear that foreign policy was not the prime reason why they seek to attack and kill us. Read their propaganda for themselves. You know, they clearly said, we hate you first and foremost because you are disbelievers, because of our secular liberal values. And that's what ISIS themselves are saying. And I just
No, not for the moment, sir. I'll come back to you, yes.
I just want to come back on you on those.
Andy Burnham.
They don't... The individuals that commit these acts, and this was true in Paris as well, they do not live a devout Muslim lifestyle. They're not true Muslims in any way, shape or form. And the problem, I think, is what I hear is the idea that the person who committed this awful atrocity this week, or who attacked Westminster, suggesting that they in some way represent the Muslim community. They in no more way represent the Muslim community than the person who killed Joe Cox represents the white British community.
The woman there in the front. Yes, yes. Yes.
With respect, Sarah Khan, I find it very disappointing that a non-Muslim seems to understand more about the Muslim community than you do. With respect, because, Andy, the issues, I've just completed a postgraduate thesis on Prevent. The principles of Prevent is what we all want. I work in a teacher in schools, safeguarding. Of course we don't want children to be radicalised, but what did the NUT say? Suspicion in the classroom, confusion in the staff room, that's what it's causing. We want the principles of Prevent, we all want. None of us want radicalisation, but let's be very clear that for Prevent to work, it has to first of all get on board, it has to be community-led, not with just government favourite organisations, with grassroots organisations like organisations I work with in Manchester. So I think it needs to appeal to everybody. And we're all on board with the principles of Prevent, no doubt. But let's root out the causes of terrorism. Let's not try and focus. Prevent focuses on spotting the terrorists. That's what the Prevent Duty Guidance actually says. How do you spot a terrorist, basically? And the Chief Reviewer, David Anderson, his own report mentions certain facts whereby changes do need to be made. Dame Casey's report, you know, the Home Secretary, the few examples that you quoted, I do agree. There could be some benefit, and I read about those examples where families were comforted, but those are far and few between. The channel referrals that have caused damage, the incorrect channel referrals, unfortunately, because maybe it's new lack of experience, they've caused far more damage within Muslim families.
Thank you very much. Nazir.
I mean, can I say, what you said is absolutely right. There are some issues around the training. There are some issues in the way it's implemented. I think you used the word new. It's a new approach. And some people are a bit overzealous in how they apply it. Some people don't really understand what they're doing. And that's something that has to be dealt with and is being dealt with, I can assure you. In terms of the religious theology behind this. You know, I'm a British Muslim. You know, you don't love your first... It's like having two children. You don't love your first child any less when you have a second. I'm absolutely delighted and proud to be born in this country and to live in this country. And I was chief prosecutor. I didn't go out blowing people up or wanting to harm somebody. So there's something else going on here. And, you know, there are examples which the Home Secretary referred to. One guy who was on his way to Syria to join ISIS, the last thing he bought was a book called Islam for Dummies. He knew he needed something. That's the point. He knew. Well, I get that, but he needed something to get through the recruitment process. So religion wasn't what drove him. There were all sorts of other things that drove him. There was grievances, there was redemption, there's ego. How many of these people working for ISIS suddenly become commanders of a platoon of two? You know, they go there for all sorts of reasons, and that's why we have to have an approach that isn't one size fits all, but that does work with the communities. Absolutely.
We've got a number of hands up, and I will come to you, but I want to take a question from Shelley Blackston, please, at the stage. Shelley Blackston.
Yeah. Isn't it about time that anyone who is a suspected terrorist should be thrown out of the UK immediately?
Amber Rudd.
I think that's quite a difficult definition to have, anyone who is a suspected terrorist. As Sarah said, you've got a situation where people are becoming radicalised, they may be having radical thoughts, but it doesn't mean they've committed a crime. We have the rule of law here. We have to make sure that we have the rule of law and that we do it correctly. But don't think that we're not making sure that we're keeping everybody protected. We have our strategy on Prevent, which we hear tonight is fairly controversial, but it's still, I think, rescuing people, stopping people becoming radicalised. We have an intelligence service that works closely with the police, that is delivering results. 18 serious plots have been foiled by them since 2013. They do fantastic work to keep us safe. And we will take action, of course, where we see that there are terrorist or potential terrorist conversations. The intelligence services are doing their jobs well in order to do that.
But your answer to Shelley Blackston is you can't throw people out of the UK because they're suspected terrorists. But you do say in your Conservative manifesto we're going to consider new criminal offences that might be created to defeat terrorism. What kind of new criminal offences are you going to consider creating?
Well, it will depend what comes out of our various initiatives we've also put in there. We're going to have a commission on extremism to find out what else needs to be done. We want to tackle this in a way that I hope will engage the communities and be thoughtful about it as well. But terrorists, don't forget, also come from abroad, so we work internationally with other countries, with European partners, with other countries from farther afield, particularly trying to spot any returning foreign fighters to make sure they don't get into the country, as well as looking for them internally.
But British fighters who go abroad, of course, you can't do anything about when they come back.
We haven't,
unless you can prosecute them.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of tools at our disposal to try and make sure that we stop them coming back where we can, that if they do come back, we have the evidence in order to lock them up.
But on the point that you make, new criminal offences, from what I hear from you, you're not really thinking of new criminal offences at all. You're just saying you're going to consider
No, we are thinking about new criminal offences.
What kind of thing? What area?
I can't be drawn on that at the moment, I'm afraid, David.
Because you don't know the answer? Or
I do know the answer. I just don't want to have that discussion here. We're not being political. It would be difficult to have right here. But
all right.
There'll be more of that.
Sarah Khan, what do you make of the point that Shelley Blackstone made, that we should be much rougher, tougher on suspected terrorists?
Well, I agree with the Home Secretary that when we're talking about suspected terrorists, the idea that we throw people out of our country is not the way we're going to defeat this problem. Look, we have to stand for our values. That includes the rule of law, standing for human rights, and I fundamentally believe that the best way we're going to win this battle against extremism is through the prism of human rights. We can't abandon our values. And already we are seeing people who are being convicted. There have been around 269 odd people who've been convicted between the period of, I think, 2005 and 2015. We've got to use our court system. And also, we've got to be very careful when we're saying, this person is a suspected terrorist. We've got to go through the rule of law, and I think that's really, really fundamental.
Do you want to come back on this, Shelley?
I just can't get over what happened on Monday. And had anybody known that he was capable of what he was capable of doing, And
I think I don't think there's a single person in this room who's not feeling what you're saying and does not have sympathy with what you're saying. But throwing them out is not the way of solving this problem. It's about dealing with having a multi-pronged strategy and we can counter this way in a much more effective manner.
Colin Perry?
If you want to throw them anywhere, throw them into my peace centre. And we'll work with them. And we'll take as long as it takes. We'll take as long as it takes to try and change the way they behave and the way they think. Now, you may think that's fanciful. It isn't. We've got ample evidence we can do it, and we don't play with people's minds. We just talk to them. We reintegrate them into British society as best we can. But you cannot abandon the rule of law and say, you're suspected, off you go. You can't do it. That would cause major problems. But throw them our way.
All right. The woman in a blue and white shirt there, striped, yes.
Hi there. First of all, I would like to say that my thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their families. I myself am a Muslim. I am a British Muslim and I'm very proud of my heritage. But I am also a realist, and there is an elephant in the room here, and unfortunately, it is very unfortunate, there is an issue with regards to radicalisation and extremism that does exist within our community. That is something that we have to accept and we have to deal with. I would like to go back to what the gentleman over there was saying when he referenced a mosque. Yes, we do have an issue within our mosques, within our religious institutions. We have children being taught the Wahhabi interpretation of the Quran. We have Saudi-trained clerics coming in and speaking to children as young as 7. They have these books, children are taught we have to do something about it. Stop, I would say, for now, temporarily, close down all Saudi-financed mosques. And I myself, as a Muslim, am a Muslim, so, we have to do something about it, yes. Not only have our own homegrown terrorists, where terrorism is also being imported right under our noses. Yes, there are. Yes, there are.
Yes, there are.
Sorry, who said that there aren't? What? Who's?
I'm saying they're not officially.
Hold on.
There are.
Say it again. Sorry, we didn't hear.
No Saudi-funded mosques in the UK. That's a misnomer. There used to be money that was brought in from abroad, but that has all stopped, and it stopped a long time ago.
Are there no Wahhabi preachers and no Saudi money at all? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, well, that's my knowledge. Certainly.
There are.
There are.
Yeah,
The Wahhabi
I think there's a
preachers.
difference between Saudi money and Wahhabi preachers.
Yes.
I mean, there are Wahhabi preachers, no doubt. Just answer...
Can you pick up the point of the Muslim woman who said that you've got to face the fact that there is a lot of...
I'm 100%...
The language of
I'm 100%
radical
behind,
language is heard in the mosques.
I'm 100% behind her. Yeah. I don't go to any meeting, for example, which is just exclusively men. I ensure that if they invite me to a place of worship, there have to be women there. You have to change their behaviours. You've got to confront them when they are coming up with the kinds of things that you just identified yourself, because that's how, sadly, this generates even more hate. Yes. And how they generate difference as well, which is something that we've got to deal with. But at the same time, the communities themselves are taking action. They just need to do more. One of the things I'm doing, actually, is setting up a community COBRA, which is made up of not the usual suspects, but people perhaps like you might want to join, who are young, who understand the issues and work together to try and develop solutions. And I think that's what we need to do, because the problem with Muslim, there is a deficit in Muslim leadership in this country. The vast majority of Muslims are now under 25, female and from low-income backgrounds. The leaders are male, over 50, from middle-class backgrounds, and there is that dislocation.
So how do you adjust that deficit?
Well, we stop talking, sadly, to people like me. You stop talking to the older generation, the people who claim that they're community leaders. The white community don't have community leaders. Why do we suddenly assume the minorities have community leaders? We start engaging with young people. We start talking to people in student land. We get them into the room and talk to them about how we can tackle this issue.
Very good.
Okay.
Just let me have one quick question from Assad Riaz, and then I want to go back to the other point. Assad.
To what extent have the leaked security details jeopardised our special relationship with the US?
I just want to put this to you, Amber Rudd, and also to what extent it may have jeopardised the police investigations here.
Well, it was very disappointing. I took it up with Secretary Kelly and the Attorney General and made it very clear that they needed to sort this situation out. The Prime Minister has spoken to President Trump today, and he has said he will address it as well. I understand today that the head of counterterrorism has said that information exchange will resume, so I think it had the right effect. I don't believe it has damaged the investigation, nor our relations in the long term. But in the short term, what was so upsetting about it was that it must have been such a terrible thing for the families to see. When this was a well-run investigation, actually our newspapers had behaved well in terms of working with investigators, not releasing information which they might have had. Right. So I think it was very hard on the families, but I hope that period is over.
Briefly, Andy.
Well, from the minute that the attack happened, information was beginning to appear in US newspapers. It's outrageous. I raised it with the US ambassador early in the week and said, this can't be right. You know, the lead investigator has to control the release of information, the British police, because otherwise you compromise the investigation. I said that, and then it happened again. Yesterday, pictures from the scene. Families are in a hotel in Manchester. They've not even been able to go to the scene, and yet there are pictures in a US newspaper. It's absolutely outrageous what has happened this week. It is wrong. It is arrogant. It is arrogance of the Americans. And it is disrespectful to the people of Greater Manchester, most importantly, the families of those who died and those who are injured. It's my job to speak up for the people of Greater Manchester.
Has it damaged the investigation?
I think at this stage the damage is manageable, I think, if there has been damage. Right. And I don't think there has been any serious damage. But, however, there is an important point of principle here. I don't want a diplomatic row, but this cannot happen again, and we need to make that absolutely clear.
I want to end with a question from Irfan Munir, please. Irfan Munir.
My 8-year-old English daughter asked me why her friends are referring to her as being a terrorist. What can be done to stop hate toward Muslims?
Has that actually happened to her?
Yes.
When did that happen?
That happened yesterday, and also the journey to work this morning. I found so difficult. I had to explain to her what a bomb is. She's asking me certain questions. Dad, what does a bomb look like? What's the size of a bomb? It was absolutely a horrendous journey into work this morning.
Sarah Khan, we've only got a couple of minutes left. Be very brief on this, but what can be done? And it's silly to say in a couple of minutes. But
Absolutely horrendous that we hear this. I mean, even the NSPC and Child and other organisations are picking up the fact that there are Muslim children experiencing this kind of abuse on school premises. And I think, for me, this is a part of a wider issue, really. It's about how we talk about British Muslims in this country. I do disagree with you, Andy. I think, trying to promote British Muslims as a homogenous community is not the right way of dealing with this issue. The fact of the matter is, we have to recognise that there are different trends. There is a positive trend amongst British Muslims who are integrated, who are contributing to our country in all sorts of manners, serving in the armed forces, are doctors, in the arts, music and so forth. But at the same time, what we also have to recognise is that there is a negative trend amongst some British Muslims who oppose democracy, who despise different interpretations and pluralistic interpretations of the religion.
I'm going to stop you
the
because
matter
we've
is
got
that we have to counter those negative people, because it's what you said, the Muslim woman and the elderly, the man at the back there, because that counters and that feeds that kind of narrative, and we've got to show that there's not a homogenous Muslim community.
The worry is, of course, that increasingly British people will think all Muslims are terrorists, because the hard-line people who print those leaflets that this chap mentioned, who are the very extreme end of the Muslim faith, are the ones who are discrediting the whole of the Muslim faith. I mean, the overwhelming majority of Muslim people are the same as the rest of us in this country, whatever our faith, good people. But though your poor kid is going to get tagged with that, and that's exactly what the bomber wants. He wants to split society. He wants to generate hate.
Very briefly, if you would.
Absolutely. What Colin said a moment ago is absolutely right. This is about creating division. We need to have these conversations. I'm glad that she was able to open up to you, and you can have a conversation with her, because that, ultimately, us as parents need to talk to our children, and that's how we deal with this issue.
Andy Burnham.
I think part of the answer is be careful with language. People talk about Muslim terrorism or Islamic terrorism, and that suggests that this is the whole of the Muslim community that is to blame. That is very dangerous if you suggest that that is the case. I think the BBC actually are wrong to say so-called Islamic State. They should call them Daesh, because don't give them the kind of impression that they represent the whole Muslim community. These people that are involved in this terrible act were extremists, terrorists. They should be described as such, and they should not be described in a way that casts this kind of terrible kind of sense of gloom and despair over the Muslim community. Colin Parry is absolutely right to say what he just said. These individuals do not represent the Muslim community in Greater Manchester, and that needs to be pointed out every opportunity we get.
Your daughter had the confidence to report it to you. We need to make sure that everybody has the confidence to call out hate crime wherever it is. And that first thing I did as Home Secretary was to publish a hate crime action plan. Now more than ever, we need to make sure that people have the confidence to report hate crime, and we will particularly engage with the schools to ensure that they have the ability and the information they need over this difficult period to engage with young people as well.
All right. Thank you very much. Our hour is up, I'm afraid. Thank you very much, everybody, and I'm sorry to those of you who have your hands up and haven't been able to get in. That's the way it is. Question Time is going to be in Barnet next week, and then we have leaders' specials, Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn, one after the other, in York on Friday the 2nd of June, and Nicola Sturgeon and Tim Farron on Sunday the 4th of June in Edinburgh. So if you want to put questions to those leaders, details of how to apply are on the screen there. You can either go online or ring us on 0330 123 9988. If you're listening and have been listening to this debate on 5 Live, there's reaction to what's been said here on Question Time Extra Time, which follows immediately. But my thanks, first of all, to our panellists who came here tonight, and a particular thanks to all of you who came here to take part in this debate. From Salford, in Greater Manchester, and from Question Time until next Thursday, good night.
When it came to my TV habits, I'd watch